Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars. Today we're going to be talking about the complete guide for Carton. This guy, Carton, is awesome. He's so much fun to use. Currently one of the best damage dealers in the global version of Brave Exvius. So today we're going to take a look at his skills, his TMR, his STMR, as well as some builds and a basic idea of how you can use him. Now, Carton is kind of like some of the other damage dealers we've had in the past, like Xeno or Agstar, where they have slightly complicated... I mean, he's not too bad. The rotation's not too bad, but he does dish out a ton of damage. So, before diving into his abilities, you know how we do this. We first look at his TMR and STMR. Scarlet Moon is his Trustmaster reward, and this gives you a decent amount of flat attack at 35 with Eternal Bloodlust, which gives you 50% attack when equipped with a fist, which this is phenomenal for a Trustmaster reward. Like, that's amazing. That's super, super good. It's not always going to be best in slot if you're talking about like the highest tiers of builds, but it is going to be super amazing for people who plan to use fist users in the future, which can include units like Carton himself, as well as Madame Adele, and even King Rain. King Rain is actually a fist user once we have Aigion Arm Plus thing from Aigion Kai, so that's something to keep in mind. Is that can be handy for that. And speaking of fists, Carton's STMR is the Wild Fang Heirloom, which is a 170 attack fist weapon that gives 50% true dual wield. So this is pretty amazing on him. This is pretty decent on other true dual wielders that can use fists, such as Bartz perhaps. You could use this with Bartz's STMR if you wanted to do that route, or you could use the Wind Sword or whatever. It is really handy for that. I think it's going to be best on him and Madame Adele. But aside from that, I'm not 100% sure who else would most benefit from it. But it is a really handy STMR, though I can't really say it's worth the chase. So, looking real quick at his kit, Carton has a pretty simple kit. He has self-attack buffs, he has self-imbues, he has imperils, and he has chaining moves for Bolting Strike, AMOE, and Aerial Ray. He has the ability to remove his own breaks, and he even has the ability to provoke. And you can build him relatively easily as an evade provoker, but that's not really how I tend to use my damage dealers. If that's the sort of silliness you want to jump into, then by all means go for it. It's just not for me. The most important abilities that you're going to be using in his rotation are his 3 cooldown skills down here. Bestial Barrage is his bread and butter attacking ability. Wild Slash is an important modifier buffing ability. And then if you're going to do his self-imbues and imperils, you're going to want to use Terrifying Howl for the imperil. And then, shoot, I can't remember his imbue. Which one was it? All the names are like the same. I think it's Bestial Slash, is that it? Nope. We'll find it. Fire and Dark, consume. See, and he's able to give Dark Element to somebody else using Full Moon Cursed Blood, which is nice. So you reduce Dark. Oh yeah, it's right here. Full Moon Dark Side. So this is a 5-turn Dark Imbue if you want to use his own self-imbues and imperils. Now, I personally don't want to mess with that. I use external imbuers and imperilers for the majority of my damage dealers because it is so annoying to find a friend unit with the right equipment, so I just don't bother. I just take non-elemental friends, do some imbuing, do some imperiling, and manage it on my own. So that's going to be the first rotation I'm going to model, and then we can talk about how you can use imbuing or equipping elemental weapons or his own imperils on top of that. So if you are imbuing and imperiling externally, meaning you're using like someone like Sylvie to give him his elemental attacks, then this is the rotation you want to follow. You want to use his 2 cooldown skills first. You want to use Savage Awakening and Crimson Blitz. These are going to increase his modifiers, I believe, and his stats. Savage Awakening removes breaks, and it deals some HP damage to himself. It gives him damage mitigation, and it gives him triple cast. So that's something you want to do so that you have triple cast right out of the gate. And then Crimson Blitz reduces defense of the enemy by 60%, does some damage, and it increases his modifiers for Bestial Barrage. So you want to use those two, and then Wild Slash is the third thing you want to cast. Okay, and remember, this rotation is for if you are externally imbuing and imperiling Carton. Okay, so we'll use those three, and that's going to be our opening 3 abilities, and that's going to get us stacked up and ready for some Bestial Barrage, which is our most damaging ability. I should have brought an MP battery in here with him, because I forgot he chews through MP and doesn't really regenerate it very well. Now, on the following turns, you want to take 2 turns to use a triple Bestial Barrage, because these are the turns that you have the modifier buffs, as well as having the triple cast. So these are going to be really good turns. It's almost like using Elena in a lot of ways. Like, he has a very similar sort of feel to Elena in that he takes a turn or two to ramp up, and then he starts doing the triple cast. It's really, really fun. Now, on your 4th turn, that's where you're gonna want to use his biggest damage, which is Frenzied Rampage. All right, you can't use this one very often. You can only use it once every 11 turns, but it is his highest damaging ability, and it also grants triple cast again, so it kind of gives you a way to re-enable that triple cast. So after you've done 2 sets of Bestial Barrage, on turn 4 you want to go ahead and use this, and that'll set you up for more triple casting. And it does a dumb amount of damage. Like, it's seriously so OP. It's just silly how good it is. But yeah, that gives us triple cast available to use again. Now, the simple premise basically for the rest of his rotation is that you want to use Wild Slash to keep your modifier up, and then Bestial Barrage to keep doing the damages. And then whenever the cooldown abilities are available, you want to go ahead and pop those and use Bestial Barrage. So as long as you've got this modifier up and your cooldowns are on cooldown, that's when you spam your Bestial Barrage. So turn 4 would be when your Wild Slash buffs fall off, so you go ahead and want to use them again. Granted, I don't have enough MP to model that, but whatever, you get the idea, all right? Pretty simple, and of course you see the graphic on the screen, gives you an idea of how this rotation works. Now, if you wanted to equip Carton with a dark weapon so that you didn't have to externally imbue and you could just have him imperil for himself, which is the other way I would recommend, your first turn would change a little bit. You would do Savage Awakening first, and then you would do Terrifying Howl. This reduces dark resist, and if you use it after Savage Awakening, it increases the amount of the imperil. And then you do Wild Slash. So that would be your turn 1 if you have a dark weapon equipped. So now the enemy is imperiled to dark by 100%, and you have some of your buffs up. And then turn 2, you would activate your other cooldown skill, Crimson Blitz, and then go into some Bestial Barrages, just like that. And then just like with the other rotation, you would do another set of triple Bestial Barrage, and you'd follow that up with your cooldown skill, Frenzied Rampage. Right, so that's pretty straightforward. All you have to do is weave in an imperil move. I wouldn't recommend doing self-imbues. You don't really lose that much damage by swapping over to a dark weapon. In fact, you might gain damage by just not having to use lower potency self-imbue moves. Now, one other ability that we haven't really talked about much is Moonlit Strike, which is his limit burst. It's pretty cool looking. I like it. He goes all beast form. I'm pretty sure that's the same sound effect as White Knight Noel's, his counter ice attack. Wait, let me listen to that. Yeah, that's literally the same. That's literally White Knight Noel's glacial wave attack. That's literally the same sound effect. Okay, Gumi, I'm onto your games. You're busted. You're busted. Shally, I'm telling on you. Anyways, moving that to the side, using his LB unlocks an ability called Lunar Basher. Now this is kind of like his big cooldown skill, Frenzied Rampage. It's only kind of, I guess, like a mini version of that. It is still really, really powerful. It does a large modifier. It self-berserks, but the berserk falls off before his next turn, so it's just a free attack buff. And it gives him a chance to counter physical attacks taken by allies with a 100% chance 3 times, and it also gives him triple cast. So this is something that you can do when you're like 10 or 11 turns into your rotation and you don't have your cooldowns lined up, for triple cast. Using your LB and then using this skill, Lunar Basher, to unlock triple cast absolutely works to kind of keep you going with the T casts. Now that skill is a finishing move, which is a little bit of a bummer. I hate it when they create a unit that is like a strict chainer and it does great chain damage, and then they're just like, yeah, let's throw in a finishing move for no reason. It just complicates things. I mostly ignore it and I'm like, yeah, that's just a T-cast turn. Whatever. But yeah, that's something that you can go ahead and do. One thing that is nice about it is that when you have his Trust Master equip... Oh no, it's not that. It's when you get him to level 120, his Precursor of Shadow passive makes it so that when you activate his Limit Burst, he gives himself 3 stacks of evade. So this is also something that can be handy for surviving some incoming physical damage or some other stuff like that. So it is super, super nice. Now that about covers it for the rotation. Let's go ahead and dive into some builds. Now this time we're going to look instead, a lot of times I'll normally showcase the super mega top tier whale builds, but this time we're actually going to look at something a little more budget first, because I think people are going to find it very interesting that with Doorpot's Carton with only trial equips and 5-star base TMRs or more common, you can get him to 3200 attack or higher. Okay, this build gets him to 3267 attack with a free slot. That's pretty freaking good. I know people with STMRs who can't hit 3267, okay? That's a pretty sweet amount of attack. Now, with Carton, both in your top tier builds and your mid tier builds, you're going to want to look at using Longinus as one of your weapons. It is a very high flat attack at 190, and it is a free trial reward, so that's fantastic. Now, if you don't have Carton's STMR, you do want to use Tiger Fangs. Also a trial reward. Tell me about gearing friendly. Okay, this is great. Tiger Fangs is 173 attack, and it's a fist weapon, and you do want to have a fist weapon equipped on all of his builds. That enables all of his fist passives and especially the passive for his TMR, the Scarlet Moon. Now, of course, you do want his TMR or his STMR equipped so that you can activate triple cast on turn 1 and get the rest of his attack passives. So you don't want to miss out on that. Now, in the headpiece, you want to give whatever your best attack piece is. And in a lot of builds, as far as accessories and materials and stuff, you're just going to have to figure out what gives you the best amount of attack while maxing out attack percentage as well as true dual wield. So in this particular example, we're maxing out flat attack and then doing the true dual wield in the materia slot with dual form. That does overcap our true dual wield by 50%, but it does allow us to equip higher flat attack, which is why we're able to get higher attack overall. And then, of course, percent attack materias to finish out the rest of his stats. I do recommend that you at least pay attention to his HP and spirit, because while you are able to get him to obscene amounts of attack with free slots, sometimes you may have to compensate for his innately low spirit. Luckily, he does have a guts passive, which is helpful for surviving some things, but you may need a slot or 2 dedicated to just some tanky stuff in fights where you take a lot of magical damage. Just something to keep in mind. And I think that applies for just about any unit, but it doesn't help that Carton has innately low spirit. But luckily, his defense is on the solid side, even just, maxing him out for damage. Now, this build is a little bit crazy, and the funny thing is, you'll notice that this build only has 100 more attack than the previous build that we featured, and the difference is that instead of using no STMRs, we have STMRs in most slots, okay? And that's the amazing thing about Carton, is that even if you don't have the best equips in the game, you're still able to push quite a lot of value out of him. So even if I'm running a whale tier endgame build, I'm only getting an extra 100 attack. Now, granted, I am freeing up a lot of free slots for killers, which is where you're going to make up a lot of ground in the damage department, as well as having freed up up slots for defensive boosts, which, you know, that ties into what we were talking about with him having low spirit. So with this particular build, he has almost 20,000 HP, which is huge, but he only has 300 spirit. So that's something, you know, you might have to build around, throw on some equips to help him with his tankiness. But the primary difference with this build is that I used his own STMR instead of his TMR. Use Lunette's Clothes for higher base attack, and then use the double Coin of Fate Sabin, which is probably one of the most OP pairs of STMRs that you can have, especially for some of the damage dealers that we have coming down the line. Because for Carton, if you have Coin of Fate Sabin, you want to slap that on him. It's OP, gives 60% attack, 55 flat attack, and 30% HP. And then down the line, we're going to get units like King Rain, who will be a true double hand fist user with his top tier builds, as well as Madame Adele, who will use fists such as Carton's STMR, and for both of those units you're probably going to want to consider Coin of Fate Sabin if you have it available. I know most people won't, but I'm one of the lucky few who has 2 of them, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what that can do. So that overall kind of completes his build on the high end of things, and you know, if you don't have STMRs, it doesn't actually matter, because Carton is super mid-tier player friendly in terms of builds, so that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're looking at a damage dealer. So that brings us to the analysis of whether or not Carton is worth the chase or worth the investment for you. I always really struggle to recommend limited time banners to people because they are limited time, and so, you know, I know Gumi's given us some events in the past where they've rerun, you know, Halloween or limited time banners that are GLX and given us chances to pull stuff and things like that, but I don't really want to bank on future things. It's like you want to get the most value out of a unit from day one, and you want to get value out of it for like the next 3 to 6 months, right? That's kind of what you would hope for out of pulling for a damage dealer. Now, the good news is that Carton can give you that value. His damage is phenomenal. It's top of the pack. That's amazing. And even with King Rain coming out, he's not going to be left in the dust. You know, he's still going to be competitive in terms of damage. So if you're trying to decide between the two and you're like, well, I just like Carton better, then that's awesome. You know, keep him or go after him and go with that. One thing to consider, of course, is that Carton is on a split rainbow banner between him and Godrea. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't really love Godrea's sprite. That's the thing I struggle most with her, is that I have a really hard time looking at her or taking her seriously. She looks kind of like Mei from Overwatch, but only like, I don't know, Kmart brand Ghostbusters vibe. It's just not for me. Okay, I know some people like it, but for me, it's not for me. So you do run that risk if you pull for Carton that you may end up with Godrea. But the good news about Godrea is that she is also a top tier damage dealer. If I remember right, some people have run different calculations and put her in different spots, but ultimately she's at the very least in the top 5 damage dealers in terms of just damage output, and she brings a lot of interesting utility and stuff, and I've only barely touched her, so that's something where I need to do my part and learn how to use her better, or at all, since I haven't used her yet. But I think the good news is that if you get her, you get a good unit, if not an ugly unit, so, you know, that's something to consider. I think, yeah, I mean, the bottom line is it comes down to what you need in your party. If Carton is somebody that you feel like can help you flesh out your party roles, he's got great flexibility in terms of equipment options, as far as chaining frame options, and he does dish out quite a lot of damage. I've been impressed with him, and I've had a lot of fun using him so far. The whole Castlevania werewolf sort of feel to his sprite, I think, is what kind of caught my attention, and so I was like, yeah, I kind of need to have that. So for me, that was good enough to go ahead and go for it, but whatever it is for you, think it over, and just know that if you get him, you won't be disappointed. So that just about covers today's complete guide about Carton from the Halloween banner. Let me know what you think of this video down in the comments below, and I'll see everybody in the next video.